building, oh, PV panels and all that. I would say no, there's a bit more to it than that. And I personally like the Brundtland definition of sustainable development, meeting the needs of the future meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations to meet their needs. Because it's intergenerational, it's about the kind of world we want to leave tomorrow. It's not just a low carbon world, it's got to be a genuinely sustainable world. So, what does it mean to you? For a lot of people, it may be building a healthy home. And I think health should be the top priority. Ignore health, ignore people, you get Grenfell. Okay? It might be a home that's filled with natural light, built with natural materials. A lot of people come to me saying, you know, we've got hypersensitivities to different sorts of products. To avoid formaldehyde, products that off gas. Yes, we want it to have a low energy demand, but what about low water use as well? None of us, unfortunately, seem to be getting any younger. Adaptability is equally important. If you're building your forever home, let's make it a forever home, one that can change as we change. You might decide to build to certain standards, but you know, be aware that things like the Passive House Standard or EnerFit, or the ACB standards are fairly limited in their metrics. They're only really looking at the energy or carbon question. And at the end of all that, renewable energy. Not the first thing, it's about the last thing you look at. So, ultimately, it comes down to what your own values are. I would suggest, therefore, based on those, that you set some aims. And we've got to break this one down into the construction phase and the in-use phase. And they're different, but both of them are resolved in the design phase. That's when the hard work is done. Hercule Poirot would say we exercise the little grey cells. So, some suggested aims for the construction phase that we should have a positive local impact. I think that's very important. Building a new home has a huge impact on the locality. That home's going to be there for all the neighbours to see and look at for, well, forever. Let's protect the ecology that's already there. That tree's not in the way of your build. It's been there for sometimes a couple of 100 years or more. Use low impact materials, minimise waste. These are no-brainers. For the in-use phase, yes, optimise health, minimise energy use, enhance ecology, build beauty. Beauty is the truth that dare not speak its name about buildings. When we build, we have the opportunity to enhance our environment. And this is why so many people watch Grand Designs. They enjoy the beauty of what's being built. Moving on to materials. Why are materials so important? Well, this is a purely notional graph, but it illustrates an important point. So the blue line is the impact of construction. So we have a massive impact at the beginning of the build process. And then we use energy and water and other materials to maintain a house as it goes along. The little vertical blue lines may be major refits. And at the end, the deconstruction and recycling of your building. And as we've got better and better at building energy efficient and water efficient buildings, then the impact of the construction phase becomes relatively larger. This is important. So that's why I'm going to bang on about materials for a few minutes. These are only examples, so use FSC timber. Well, of course we shouldn't be chopping down rainforests to build whatever we need to do. It's unnecessary. Unnecessary to use hardwoods for the most part. In my hands there is warm cell insulation to recycled newspaper. Great stuff. I've built down to U values 0.12 just using that. OSB. Why is OSB there rather than plywood or chipboard? Or MDF in particular? Because those products are so high in formaldehyde. Formaldehyde recognised by the World Health Organization as a carcinogen. So, whether you're building a kind of conventional brick and block construction or whether you're going to go for something much more exotic like hempcrete or straw bale, use what you've got on site. You might be taking down a building. That's how a lot of people get a building plot these days. It's demolishing an existing building. That may give you some hardcore, which is very useful to use as your road base if you want to crush it. Wherever you can, specify renewable or recycled material. Now, not only are you using a lower impact product, you're also helping to create a market for those products. That makes the recycling of them more likely to happen in the first instance, and that creates what we call a virtuous circle. Good news all round. When you do specify new materials, of course, we have to, plenty for new builds, try and use ones which have low energy and low embodied pollution. And there are ways of designing with modular design and so forth which make this even better. When we think of materials, we tend to think of the big ticket items: walls, roof, foundations. I could talk about foundation design and sustainability for half an hour, but don't forget the finishes. Now, the kitchen that you see there on the left, it's the same building, it's just the top floor is kind of split into two. That is an eco kitchen, if you like. We are not using chipboard worktops, they're solid beech, but FSC. Birch ply carcassing rather than MDF, which is the kind of default choice of almost all kitchen manufacturers. They just don't know to use anything else. You're the specifier, you're the client, you're in charge. Nudge your kitchen manufacturer towards something more sustainable. Natural linoleum. Linoleum is called linoleum because it was made from linseed oil. At some point in the 20th century, we replaced linseed oil with petrochemicals, and we still called it linoleum. You can get natural. It smells beautiful. I'm not a regular floor sniffer, but when you actually label this stuff, you get to grips with it. It's nice stuff. And the same with using low VOC paints. There's plenty of those around these days. I'm always amazed there's no paint manufacturers exhibiting at these places. And use natural carpets. Carpets, your average carpet has got fire retardants, insecticides, fungicides in it. And our children play with their faces in that material. It's toxic. So, plenty of alternatives: sisal, jute, natural wool for that matter. And the same applies to furnishings. So don't forget the finishes. Alright. Also a no-brainer: segregate, minimise. I used to raid that skip regularly, and whatever I didn't reuse in my workshop went through my wood burning stove. That's another good reason not to use treated timber, by the way. Simples. And while we're about it, protect the ecology, prevent pollution, and be considerate to your neighbours. One thing I like about timber frame and modular build, off-site construction, is the amount by which it can reduce the numbers of trips to site. So I think that all helps to reduce the impact on the neighbourhood of the build process, minimising transport impact. Low energy design. So we're making progress. It gets faster, don't worry. Why are we concerned with space heating? Because about 50% of our CO2 emissions, on average, come from space heating. Now, our first approach is to reduce heat losses. And that's before we get into renewables or different sorts of heating systems. We take a fabric-first approach. The two main elements, the fabric-first approach, are super insulation and air tightness. We can go further and talk about passive solar design, making use of passive solar gains. That's not the same as passive house, it's a different thing. Passive solar design has got four components to it. It's getting the orientation of the building right, it's getting the fenestration right, the windows, building in plenty of thermal mass. Heat has to have somewhere to go, and solar shading. And those last two are really important because overheating is a big issue in eco-building. Now, that's a concept design for some buildings I project managed back in the noughties. You have a large glazed southern facade, and the sun can enter the building when it is low in the sky in the winter months. The slats you see on the outside of the building there are set at a certain angle, So when the sun is high in the sky, it is reflected back out. It cannot enter the building. There's also a solar space which has automatically opening vents at the bottom and the top. So when it's too hot, air flows through that and helps to cool the space. But just as importantly, there's tons of thermal mass. So I'm going to show you a construction detail. On the inside, you have that hatch. If you're not familiar with building drawings, that crisscross area is dense concrete block. This is not lightweight breeze block. This is dense concrete block. On the outside, this is outside, this is inside. On the outside, you've got a super insulated timber frame. This looks like a wooden building. It's actually a masonry building because the dense concrete block is holding up the roof structure. That's how you define what a structure is. It's what's holding up the roof. So, dense masonry core, super insulated frame on the outside. That gives you basically a heavyweight building with a warm jacket on the outside. It turns the entire building into a storage heater. Again, a little detail I just like to show you, and there are kind of variants of this around in the exhibition today. But because we need to build deep walls to get that super insulation into place, you don't have to use a deep piece of timber for your stud. You can use two pieces of timber linked by a plywood plate. That eliminates the thermal bridge that goes through a piece of timber. If you take a thermal image of a timber frame building, it's striking. It's slow, but heat does move through timber. It also avoids any piece of timber more than about 5 inches, 125 mil in new money, is prone to twisting, warping, etc. That kind of construction method eliminates that problem. The main reason it does, we don't season timber properly these days. If you go to your builder's yard and buy a piece of 4x2, it was probably waving in the wind 3 weeks ago. We don't have a proper stock system now. The accountants have driven everything towards what they think of as efficiency. Okay, and you can fill it with whatever you like. Hemp, recycled denim jeans they use for insulation, warm cell, which is the recycled newspaper, whatever you like. Just wanted to touch on that detail. Okay, you've built a super insulated home. Whether or not you've been able to use passive solar design, whatever you've managed to do, you've built something which is hopefully more efficient than current building regulations. You will still have a small residual space heating demand and of course a hot water demand. Whatever we do to fabric isn't going to change your hot water demand. My wife's still going to want a bath every morning, it happens, okay? Well, we can more or less eliminate it in some buildings towards about 0 degrees, but our own heat, I think we getting on for a kilowatt. So when you do your passive design calculations, you have to take into account occupancy. Because your actual space heating will be very low, we need to think about the impact of the systems we put in. You remember that graph about your embodied impact against your in-use impact? It may not be worth the while of digging up half a field to put in a ground source heat pump. If you can buy a combi boiler yay big, you're connected to the gas network, bang, job done. If you're spending money, you're having an environmental impact. If you're naturally tight like me, you're probably quite eco-friendly. So, if you're off the gas grid, you've got two main options. You've got some kind of air source heat pump or some kind of biomass system. There's loads on the market. Advantages to each. An air source heat pump, of course, is using, or a ground source is using electricity. It'll be very similar to gas or biomass in terms of running costs, but it's less efficient in winter. Why? Because the temperature of the heat source is lousy. Ground source heat pump, less so. Ground is heated by the sun to about an average of 11 degrees, less as you go further north. If you're sucking heat out of that, you're sucking heat out of something which is warmer than the air during the space heating space heating season. But less efficient when providing hot water. Why? Because hot water runs at about 55 degrees, whereas space heating, underfloor distribution, 35, 40 degrees. Pellet boilers or log boilers, similarly, you don't have to be feeding them every 5 minutes, you can automate them. Log boilers, you batch feed them. You need an accumulator, somewhere to store that heat, so short burst, high heat, store it, and then draw from your accumulator. Draw your hot water and your space heating needs from the accumulator. They're better at doing hot water. Easy to run. The ash that they produce just goes straight on the compost heap, no biggie. They are genuinely low carbon forms of heating, unlike electrical heating. Even with an air source heat pump, ground source heat pump, it has still got a reasonably high carbon component. We're getting better, of course. Similar in running costs to gas or heat pumps, but it will cost you a lot more to buy than a gas boiler. Underfloor heating, of course, because it's low temperature, and if you're using a heat pump, great, very necessary. But even if you're using a biomass boiler or a bio-LPG boiler, then I'd still go for underfloor heating because it gets the radiators out of the way, puts the heat where you want it. Is that me doing that? The reason I put a controller picture of up there, I love technology. The fact that you can control your heating system from your phone is a great advance. If you're lucky enough still to have a social life and you're coming back suddenly at 10 at night instead of 5, then you can tell your phone, tell your heating system via the phone to come on at 9 instead of at 4. That's a straight win. You've saved 4 hours of heating. I love solar water heaters. They're kind of low tech. They may not pay you back, but if you're building anyway and putting in a stored water system, then, well, why not? You've just got to put an extra coil in the cylinder. Oh yeah, space heating not allowed on RHI, that's the renewable heat incentive. If you're looking to collect that, you can feed a solar water heater into a larger accumulator so it makes a contribution to space heating. Good thing. Ofgem don't see it that way. If you're trying to collect the RHI, don't do it because it'll disallow you. Don't ask me why. And I inspect systems on behalf of Ofgem, so there you go. And you'll still need backup source of heating for your domestic hot water. You won't get more than 50% of your hot water out of these, whatever a manufacturer tells you. So that could be gas, oil, heat pump, biomass, whatever. I should have put bio-LPG on there as well. That's started to come out now. Very good solution if you're off-grid, off-gas grid. Okay, I think that's enough about heating systems. Lighting, again, this one's really moved on. We don't tend to automate lighting control very much domestically, more non-domestically, where who's in control of the lights is a bit more fuzzy. But use natural light. I've shown that picture specifically because that roof lights over a stairwell. Stairwells and corridors are what we call the communication areas of dwellings, and that's where the lights tend to be left on. If you can light that naturally for the most part of the day, great. It's a straight win. And of course lamps have moved on. We're all moving to LEDs now. They've got much better with the colour temperatures. And same thing with power use. Again, things have moved on. Especially with European legislation, you're now choosing between an A-rated fridge and a AAA rated fridge. It's really at the margins. There's not a huge difference between them. But what about building in some drying space? Why use energy to do what nature can do? So that might mean building in a little shelter at the side of the house, so you can at least put some drying up and not worry about it getting wet if you do get a shower. So we don't really have to think that much now about what we do to drive down our power use. People say, well, what about standby? Actually, the energy use on standby is really, really low. So we can get too neurotic about it. The best is the enemy of the good. Don't worry about it. We're not going to save the planet or kill it by whether or not we leave a TV on standby. let's look at the big ticket items. And the big ticket items for you guys, if you're building new, really is about what materials you're going to use, what method of building you're going to use. Some people come and see me and they're going to build a 4,000 square foot house for 2 people. And, if you really want to be sustainable, build something a bit smaller. What can I say? Yeah, water use. Okay. Sustainability is a relative thing. So if you're building in India, the constraint may very well be, do we have sufficient fresh water? That's a picture of a rainwater harvesting system you've probably already spotted. Normally they're underground. We had a contaminated land situation on this site, so we expressed them on the porches of the buildings. Yeah, low flow taps and showers. Again, the best is the enemy of the good. If you go too low flow on a shower, it doesn't do the job. You're not going to like it. You'll throw away the shower head and put in something better. So you end up with a wasted asset. Don't push it too far. Low flush WC, same thing. We're all on 6 and 4 now. Push it down to 4 and 2. I think the lowest flush toilet ever has just come out. If it doesn't clear the pan, you've got to flush it twice. So, we can push it too far. Water butts, I see loads of them. They're always full, very rarely used, but hey, they're cheap. And if you do a lot of gardening, then great. Personally, I've got a fab garden, huge garden. I plant something, it might get a water then, maybe the following week if it's lucky, and that's it. It's got 2 chances after that, it lives or it dies. The result is that whatever's in my garden likes being there. It's the appropriate plants for that garden. I don't have to do anything to it apart from hedge trimmer or chainsaw in the worst case scenario. Yeah, rainwater harvesting, great. It's kind of marginal on the payback, but instinctively it feels wrong to be flushing potable water down the toilet. So if you're building new and you've got excavator on site anyway, there's some cheaper rainwater harvesting systems around there. Really well worth looking at. Oh, hang on, I want to go back one. That's Lindab guttering, galvanised steel, less plastic. We're getting, finally, been banging on about plastic for 20 years and nobody's listening, but it lasts longer, and as a builder, which I was for so long, you set a ladder against that guttering, it doesn't buckle, deform, and it doesn't decay with ultraviolet light either. Most plastic guttering just doesn't last that long. So I like Lindab. It looks nice too. It goes very well with timber frame. Okay, I should be on commission. Drainage. When people talk about sustainable building, drainage is not the first thing they think about. It's not sexy. Well, I live in Somerset, and it floods in Somerset for a pastime. Drainage matters to us. So, what's involved with drainage? Sustainable drainage systems. The SUDS triangle, quality, quantity and amenity. We tend to think of it just in terms of reducing the quantity of runoff, but we can actually use SUDS to clean water, to improve its quality before it's discharged to the drainage system. And if we get it right, we can provide an amenity. So a pond where wildlife can come, where the ducks will land. It's a lovely development in Stroud, co-housing development. Co-housing is where there's a common house and everybody has their own dwelling. And they had a condition not to add to the drainage system. So they built these descending ponds. So when it rains heavily, they fill up. Small pipe going out after it rains. But most of the time they're empty. So the kids play football in them. And they hold parties and bonfires in them. So kind of multi-use space, I love that. I like eco-block because it's recycled and large nib blocks. If you're going to do your block paving, the idea is to let everything drain through. Don't put hard surfaces down which immediately throw water into the public drainage system. So that's the basis of SUDS. Ecology and beauty. There's a photograph missing there of a beautiful house, but you can imagine your own beautiful house there. And I shocked people by saying this some time ago. There were a real bunch of eco-heads, and they thought, well, nothing was more important than saving the planet. I thought, well, it's got to be beautiful, it's got to be fun, or else we'll not bother. So do all these things, build beauty. So all these things are important. And developers will sometimes say to me, the big developers, I'm called in to advise, oh, we can't possibly. afford to build sustainably. You see this nasty pain in the wallet going on. And I say to them, well, we certainly can't afford not to build sustainably because it's unsustainable. You will run out of virgin rainforest if you burn it all. We've got palm oil plantations marching towards the rainforests, or through the rainforests in all kinds of places. It's not just about what we do with our buildings. I think palm oil is a separate example. My uncle is sitting there in a church in Sevenstoke in Worcestershire. It's an ancient church. They didn't build ancient churches where it flooded. They knew where it flooded, and that was not a place. We've built so many houses and other things further upstream in the catchment area of the River Severn that place now floods every few years. In fact, last weekend he had to be rescued with my aunt by the fire brigade as the water was about 3 foot deep around the house. So we're getting that, and bizarrely at the same time we're getting water shortages, and climate change is maybe part of that problem. So we can't afford not to. Just before I close, a couple of useful resources for you, particularly GreenSpec. A lot of people come and ask me, what sort of insulation should we be putting in, and GreenSpec have got a summary of all the different issues that are important, and will compare not just embodied energy but embodied pollution in these different forms of insulation, and they'll give you their lambda R values so you can work out how thick it needs to be, so what its impact is on your footprint to use different forms of insulation. And the AECB are a good lot. Some of their blogs and discussions are very cutting edge. So if you want to know really what's being discussed at the moment. Right, any questions? Oh, hang on, we've got a mic. I didn't give you much warning of that, did I? I just went bang, finished. Just along in the middle.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Nigel. You said at the beginning that when people ask you about sustainability, it's not PV. You didn't mention power generation at all. Is that because it's bottom of the list?
Yeah, well the question is, for UK PLs, we're all going to be dependent on the grid. I mean, however much PV you put in and however much battery storage, that's not going to help you out in the winter. In the winter, you're going to be pulling energy from the grid. So the question for UK PLC is, how do we get renewable energy into the national grid at least cost and least environmental cost? That's the key. I mean, we've got the second biggest tidal reach in the world. In Somerset, everybody says, well, why don't we do the Severn Barrage? Nobody can understand why that hasn't been built already. I was in California a few years ago and we couldn't get our sums to add up on PV. And after about 5 minutes, 10 minutes of talking, I said, well, hang on, how many kilowatt hours do you get a year for each kilowatt peak? He said 1,200. So we get 800. Their solar resource in California is 50% higher than ours. Horses for courses, sustainability is a relative thing. Okay, there's a lady here.
Thank you. You mentioned gas boilers.
Yep.
And the government are now saying that they want to phase them out.
Yes.
How are they going to manage to do that successfully?
It's a bonkers idea. We are generating something like 30% of our electricity at the moment from gas. Gas is a superb fuel for heating our cities because we've got the distribution network in place. It's very low losses in terms of distribution. If the alternative is to put in an air source heat pump, then what we're doing is we're taking gas and burning it, turning it into heat, turning that heat into electricity, transporting it through the national grid, and then turning it back into heat again. And I'm not an electricity supply engineer, but common sense tells me that cannot be more efficient than simply burning the gas. So, great government, come back to us with that idea once you've eliminated gas as a fossil fuel for creating electricity.
Can recycled paper be used in any part of the house? Or
Yeah.
is it,
Well, I wouldn't use it with foundations. Foundation design is a complicated thing, and there are recycled glass products which can be used as part of insulated foundations, and hempcrete can be. But yes, basically, if you put recycled newspaper in a cassette, and think of a cassette as a two-sided thing, then walls and roof, no problem. They tend to drill basically 4-inch holes everywhere and pump it in. So you build your shell and then